Remove unwanted hair from your lip, underneath your arms, your legs, anywhere on your body in just minutes. Imagine a beautiful bikini line with no irritation, no ingrown hairs. Stop shaving, stop waxing, stop sugaring, and stop wasting money. With Epilstop Plus, you'll never have to worry about unwanted hair again. Order now and get our smoothing thigh cream for hips, thighs, and stretch marks. A $20 value, yours free. We guarantee Epilstop Plus is the fastest, easiest way to remove unwanted hair or your money back. But keep the thigh cream just for ordering. Lasting hair removal is only a phone call away. Order today.
Call toll-free.
What is depression? Depression is feeling really, really, really bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Everybody's been down. Everybody has some troubles. Some of us seem to be more down in type, perhaps have more adverse lives. But usually we come back up. Usually things are working.
Right.
Sometimes really bad things are happening to us, and we get upset and depressed. And everybody says, you have a clinical depression.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it turns out that most people don't have a clinical depression. They have the miseries.
Yeah.
You'll hear me say all kinds of southernisms because they seem to have said a lot of them.
Right.
And that these people don't really get sick.
Yeah.
But people who come from families that have depression, who've had brain injuries, who've had too much use of street drugs that harm the central nervous system, or who've had previous depressions, those same kind of negative events will get them all the way down.
Right. Right.
And they're in trouble.
Uh-huh.
And they frequently can't get out by themselves, or it may take them a heck of a long time, and they and their families will have to put up with an awful lot of misery before they come out the other side. It's indeed a severe experience, and it's traumatic. They don't ever want to do that. First, this may be a bad time. You say, well, it was bad.
Yeah.
But I got out of it. I'm wiser. I'm better for the experience. Often, a severe depression, you don't feel better. You feel injured by the experience if it's really, really bad.
Yeah. Now, do the people who are, say, in a depression, and then say it's a clinical depression, now, what's the difference to say a clinical depression and, like you say, just being down?
I'm happy you asked, because clinical depression has kind of become a catchword, and I think it's an attempt to describe this really downness, below the table.
Right.
You don't bounce up like a regular depression. You're down there and get stuck.
Yeah.
And you need somebody to pay real attention to you, and quite possibly that person's going to be a medical person, typically your doctor, your minister, and very likely if it goes on in a length of time because you don't respond to ordinary kindness and encouragement, you're going to end up with a mental health professional, be it a social worker, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, or whoever. And these people have special experience, training, skills to help you start the way out, and indeed can use a variety of means to do it so that it isn't a terrible, long season through hell, as it's been described, but a hard time, a bad time that they helped you out of in a reasonable period without too much injury.
Right. I have a sense that just from talking to people, sometimes I feel like I think more people are depressed than realize. I mean, so are there, how would someone, say, recognize the difference between someone being down, and if someone really, you're saying they're really down, they seem to can't get out of it, but how could a family member or a friend, recognize the fact that maybe this family member is really in a serious, where they would need mental health professional to help them out?
I think, first of all, how the person appears. If you have a bad day, and we say day's not so good, and you kind of, maybe you've had the flu or there's some trouble, and a day or two, how you doing, Dave? And you're beginning to smile a little bit. You didn't miss work. But suppose you miss work, or you look and you really look pale, and you look like you're not sleeping. And you look like you're not eating either. And we can say, there's something wrong with that guy. Let somebody, usually, anybody who's noticing and caring is really impelled to start taking action. Sometimes people say, it's nothing, I'm all right. But that's not a good thing to accept from a person, because we often don't want to create problems or worries for other people. We don't want to admit weakness. We don't want to figure we can't cope and we aren't as good as the next person.
Yeah.
But if it's showing on our face and our body and our behavior, it's a real help if somebody says, come on, Dave, let's go talk, or let's go talk with somebody. This is getting out of hand. And that kind of general sense, I think we all know if we're looking for it, if we're willing to be aware of it, that somebody's getting in trouble. And if you can intervene, if you can use, first of all, just being interested and breaking through somebody's attempts to tough it through, I'll face it out. You can't face out bad depression. It hurts too much.
I have a sense that it's not so black and white, that, either you're happy or you're clinically depressed. I'm assuming that there's kind of stages or levels of depression, and is that correct, or is it?
Well, we've really chopped it into two pieces. On top of the table is some kind of miseries and unhappiness, and for this thing, below the table means you're in big trouble. As the season in hell I mentioned, it is very bad. And there are even levels of that from people who have clinical depression, but you go to your doctor and he says, you've got trouble, let me give you an antidepressant. If it doesn't do something, let's refer you to somebody else. And that may do it. You may start feeling better pretty soon. You may not miss work, and goodness, I hope that in several weeks while you're beginning to say, yeah, that was bad, or if that's not the case, he's going to say, I think you need some special help here. Likewise, there are all kinds of help people, resolution people. I was just looking in the mental health thing, and there's a mental health Hawaii. They've got a whole series of organizations that help, as well as the Mental Health Association and the state mental health clinics. So that it's kind of recognized that there's some trouble out there, and there's nothing wrong in calling up those people or going in and say, do you think I'm seriously depressed? And that's a really good thing to think about it, rather than say, I'm going to wait until it's my last breath, until I can't focus, or until some people say, and I'm looking down the barrel of a gun, I find myself with a knife in my hand saying, where do I poke it? Because some people will hold out, hold off, until they've really run out of hope.
In some cases, like there's maybe severe family problems. Mother and father maybe are fighting, and or maybe they're splitting up, or there could be drugs with the kids, and there's a lot of pressure within the family. Say the mother's trying to cope with all this that's going on, and the father and the children, and there may be, I would say, some covering up of these types of depressions, wouldn't there? They would try to maybe hide it, or
Sure, you don't want to look bad out there. And typically, you'll try. The truth of the matter is, the truth in this one lies in the eye of the beholder. I can tell when you're really depressed better than you, because you're not going to go around saying, I'm depressed, look at me. But I gave you some of the indications earlier that if you look tired, preoccupied, pale, you're losing weight, you don't have your usual pepper, you're not as focused as I can see you would be, we'd say, what's happening? People know. And if somebody walks in my office and knows me well and says, what's wrong? I know that my face is showing something that I am not clear about. And I usually say, excuse me. And I will walk out of the room and say, something's going on, Jim. What's happening out there? Your face is telling them something. And I'm fortunately not usually real depressed, but I am perplexed or troubled. Very often it's a clinical problem that I need to make a phone call, or I need to write a note down, or I need to say, why don't you move in this direction? Some way to focus that, and then I will come back and I'll say, how am I doing, David? And if you know me, thank God, the usual answer is, oh, you look okay now. And so that I've resolved that. If I couldn't, that's a good question. I think I would say, I don't know whether I can be of much help to you today. I think I'd better go talk to somebody and see what's going on that I'm not doing very well, because I'm supposed to be together enough to deal with your problem. And if I can't, I think I better start dealing with mine a little bit better.
Right. Now, there's this whole range of different kind of mental problems that people will have, and just in general, do people normally recognize? And I'm brought this up in just depression, but is there that keys that the person realizes that I really need, like you've been talking in general, but how they need help and they need to get assistance rather than just trying to cope, and trying to make it through in all these different wide varieties.
Well, it's a really interesting thing. You want a nice, clean answer as usual, because the different strokes and different ways of rearing provide different ways of dealing with that from cultures that say you don't show trouble, you don't complain, to other cultures that are saying, look at me, look how upset I am. And most particularly Italian and some of the Mediterranean cultures, these people are so expressive, and they say, I'm so upset, look at me, I'm sick. And often the person will come in and I say, I don't know whether you're sick, but you're certainly upset. Why don't we talk about it? Well, go on, tell me how you really feel. What on earth is going on? And friends do this just as well as psychiatrists do at this level, because people recognize particularly pain, anxiety, and fear. They may not recognize agitation quite so much. And you say, what's wrong? You say, I'm agitated. Well, I don't know whether I'm agitated or not, but there's something going on in my life. Depression's even more subtle, because if I'm getting more depressed and down, I'm coping, I'm talking, I can go to work, I can drive my car, I can use the telephone, I can write a prescription, but if you come and you notice me, you say, how's it going? And I hope I'd say, I'm trying to cope today. This is one of my sea days. We'll see whether I make it, I often say, I think I'll make it to noon, or I hope I'll make it to supper time. But even being asked makes me say, hey, what's going on? But we certainly notice pain. We try to cover it up when we can. Acute pain, most particularly panic, where our pulse goes up, our head swells up, we feel like we're going to go crazy, we feel like we may run around and shout. This used to be called an anxiety disorder. I love it, the new name, which is a panic disorder, because people really know what panic is. Panic comes from the Greek god Pan, who was said to have been 7 feet tall and played his great pan pipes and would terrify you into panic. And this is the thing, the emotional disorder that brings most people to the emergency room. It causes the most tests for heart conditions.
Oh, interesting.
Because your heart is racing and you say, I'm having a heart attack. Doctor, you've got to do something about me. I can't stand it anymore. And it really brings people to help. Depression's quite frequently, if I'm really depressed, you say, how are you? I'm saying, okay. And depressed people tend to retreat into corners. If it's an anxious depression, they can't retreat in the corner. But otherwise, if I just slow it down, if I keep it together enough, if I just freeze up enough, I'll be all right. It's okay. This is going to pass. I'm sure it'll pass. Just give it enough time. And hopefully it will. Often it won't. And the wife calls you and says, John won't come out of his room. He's hardly talking. He hasn't gone to work for the past 2 days. I don't know. I don't think he's sleeping well either. And I can't find any food he likes. And he's sort of not noticing the children. And John, of course, is working on becoming a hospital patient if he doesn't get it together pretty soon. Though if he's not too dangerous to himself or suicidal, we may let John stay at home, and hopefully he'll come to see me, and maybe we can see what might come out of that. But it's kind of a slide, depending where you are on it and how steep it is. You know how much time you've got to try to restore this person to ordinary feeling and behavior.
I think, too, in general, people don't want to admit that they have, a mental problem, if it's just depression, because that has a stigma to it, right? That I'm going to see a psychiatrist, or I'm mentally off, or whatever. And what would you say to encourage people to do seek help? Because if they do get the help, then they're going to get better, right? And if they don't seek the help, of course, then things are not going to necessarily get better. How would you encourage them?
All of these things are a part of being ill. Your body your mind, your spirit all become ill. And because people say, look, I've been depressed like this before, and I swore I would never do it again. And I am just so disappointed in myself. Here I am, and I can't function. And I say, would you please tell me how to make, you've got a bad left kidney, would you please fix your left kidney for me so we don't have to do anything? And they say, what do you mean? I say, I don't think you can fix a severe depression a darn bit better than you can your left kidney, because in fact, the front end of your brain has started shutting down. And unless something good happens, you're going to be dragging around here and feeling terrible.
Right, right. Now, there are different types of depression, and one I know is a unipolar. What is a unipolar?
A unipolar is a pure depression. These are people that have one or more episodes of being down for weeks or sometimes months, and which typically will resolve and come back up, and they will be a little the worse for wear, but back to pretty much where they started. A bipolar depression is one in which people have highs, extreme highs, and extreme lows, and they may alternate or not. Bipolar depressions are more genetic or more familial than unipolar depressions. Depressions have a genetic basis, severe ones do, and the bipolars have something like a 50 or 60% inheritance, whereas unipolar depressions have maybe a 30% inheritance. But they run, and people who are severely depressed will often come in and say, do you have any depression in your family? They say, oh yeah, I've had 2 brothers who got depressed. Gee, I had a grandfather that killed himself. And, well, you know, I don't know whether Uncle John is depressed, but he drinks a lot, because that's a kind of variant of depression.
Oh, interesting.
Alcoholism does.
A lot of people don't want to, like, for alcoholics, and they will admit that they have, say, an alcohol problem. So there might be a depression, and the alcohol is an indication of that.
It may be. I'm glad I mentioned alcoholism and genetics in the same breath, because being addictive, the tendency to be addictive is genetic, and certainly alcoholism is a highly genetic process, and surprise, they overlap, just as panic and depression overlaps, addictions and depression overlaps, obsessions and compulsions overlap, the big bad S, schizophrenia, and depressions overlap, and so there's nothing exclusive any more than you can have kidney trouble and arthritis at the same time. You can have differing kinds of things all mixed up.
And for me, I just seem to notice that addictive behavior, that is definitely an area where people seem to in denial. You know, they don't want to acknowledge that they're either alcoholic, they have a drug problem, or there's just different types of addictions. And for those people, I mean, how would you help, say, family members or whatever, talk to that family member who might be, say, alcoholic or whatever their addiction might be? Because they do have the denial, they do have this defensiveness, they don't want to talk about it. Hey, my buddies drink too, you know, John drinks too, and, you know, of course John seems to be able to handle it better. In this, the person you talk to might be just totally go completely drunk out of it. So, but how would you say to family members to help them, help that family member seek the help and realize that they do have a problem with an addiction?
If you can get the person when he's in a withdrawal state, when something's happened that's bad enough that he might say, this is not cool. This is not so good. I thought I could handle it. I thought I was doing good. Often a problem at work, where a person misses work or messes up at work. Nowadays, that they're doing drug testing, that's kind of a wake-up call for the person. And for someone who is responsible, who is interested in this man or woman having a better life, being a better worker, having a better family life, to speak to them directly. Indeed, I have quite a lot of experience with alcoholism, and many people will stop drinking to save a marriage, to save a good job, to save a valued relationship, or to save their life, their health.
Right.
And if they can realize that And these usually come after some critical event. If a person's sitting along and say, what you talking about? Sure, I drink too much. Yeah, I was out last night. Yeah, I scraped the fender on the car, but that's nothing. It's not bad. And because to do many kinds of behaviors and not be aware of them is to use denial.
Right. Now, because once again, you do have the denial. So would you encourage a family member just to talk to the person that has the addiction and just say, this is how I feel about what's going on with you and how it's affecting us and the family? Is that a good way, or is that a dangerous thing to be that open? And because there's usually, like I said, there's defensiveness and there's a closing off.
There's a time and a place for everything.
Okay. Choose your time.
Some people want to do it when the person is drunk or intoxicated.
Right.
That's got to be the worst time.
Right, that's never going to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe the morning after for some people is almost as bad.
Yeah.
But right after that, when the person is kind of feeling better, and I think most particular to say, I love you, I respect you, you're a really good friend of mine, I've known you a long time, and I've waited till I thought it was, this is the thing I have to do. I've really got to say, I got to put my money where my mouth is, and say, if you don't like this, I'm sorry, Dave, but you got a problem, and I really like to tell you what I think about it, and how it affects me, and what I think about how it's affecting you in your life.
And really have to somehow or another make that outreach to the person, because if we don't, it's just going to get worse, and they need to know that the effects of their actions.
Denial works two ways.
Yeah.
Either it's not a problem at all, or I can't talk about this. I'm just not going to bring this. I can't handle it. Somehow I'm going to get through this. I know I've got a problem. Next week I'm going to swear off. I'm going to start doing whatever. But I can't handle it. I'm just not there to say, Dave, I've got a problem.
Now I'd like to go back to depression, and we were talking about that a little earlier. What are some of the treatments for depression?
The first treatment for depression was the one we've talked about, is for somebody to pay attention and somebody to say to you, Dave, I think something going on that we ought to talk about. You're not looking so good and it worries me. I'm concerned. All of these things, if you can come from concern and love and a little pressure to let's take care of this, is the first and foremost thing, because that takes you to the next step, which is who can be of help? Who can tell us something about this? Who has some experience with this? Who knows something about this? Who can set us on the right track? And he, in turn, is going to look, and one of the first things you do, and I like sending people to their family physician or their medical specialist, is this something? Is your thyroid down? Is your kidney cutting out?
Oh, interesting.
Have you been coughing a lot? Do you have a spot on your lung? Are you smoking too much? Are you killing yourself? What's happening in your life habit pattern or in your internal medical pattern? And so the first thing he would do, or if you came to me, I would say, what's your medical status? How recently did you have a medical checkup? Did you have a chemical study? Do you have a family history of depression? Is there any heart disease or some other cancer or something else in your family? The older you get, the more you think cancer, the more you think heart disease, things like that. Certainly the thing you look at is, does your family have diabetes in it? Because, but I don't. I drink a lot of water, and my wife's worried about me. So that a fairly simple visit to a physician can answer a lot of those questions, and a visit and some lab tests.
Well, we're getting close to the end of this show. Is there anything that, as a psychiatrist, that you'd like to talk about that maybe we haven't touched on so far?
I think we all know from infancy when other people are doing well, when they're happy, when things are working for them. They ask me, how do you know when a person's getting better? I said, we're all experts in that. You can tell you can tell exactly where I am day to day. You can tell better than I can. And if we simply use that God-given talent to say, how's that guy? What's going on? Does he need my help? If I put my hand on him and say, how's it going? Anything I can do for you. That's the first step, that creative attention and love. And you then follow your nose from that to, well, if something's going on, what and how? Where do we go? What are the next steps? If it's into the mental health field, so be it. We've got lots of things to do. Certainly, I shouldn't go without mentioning the crisis line. The suicide and crisis line is out there for you, and they are a real quick first aid way to call them.
Okay, Dr. Harrison, I really appreciate you coming tonight and for giving us information about mental health and depression and the different areas. Really, it was nice of you to come in. I want to thank you all for tuning in. It's been a good program. If you want more information about mental health, we'll list the numbers at the end of the program. There are several places you can call. And look out for one another. Dr. Harrison's given us some wonderful ideas and suggestions this evening, and we appreciated his coming in. So, aloha, and have a very good evening. Put your arms around your sister, lend your brother a hand, tell your children you love them every day. Reach out, touch somebody, help them chase the blues away.
Changes. Off and off the green.